Hey, we're doing stand-up shows October 20th through the 23rd in Florida and Buffalo. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a link for tickets.
So for you, Joe Rogan,
yes,
I would say you've had it.
Yes.
So now get one shot of the vaccine.
No.
Why not?
Because I have better immunity than I would if I was vaccinated. Right?
Yes.
Don't I?
I think your immunity is really good.
So why, if I've already gotten through COVID and I was really only sick for a day, and then 5 days later I was negative, and I do have the natural antibodies now, why would I take a chance in getting vaccinated on top of that?
By the way, I'm glad you're better. I'm glad it only lasted a day.
You're probably the only one at CNN that's glad.
No.
This is from Science Magazine. It says, having SARS-CoV once confers much greater immunity than the vaccine. This is from the Israeli study. So if you have COVID, you get much greater immunity to it than you would if you got the vaccine. So why should you be mandated to take that vaccine, right? If you already had COVID, because that's the big question everyone's asking. They asked, Sanjay Gupta asks Fauci, and watch this.
There was a study that came out of Israel about natural immunity, and basically the headline was that natural immunity provides a lot of protection, even better than the vaccines alone. What are people to make of that? So as we talk about vaccine mandates, I get calls all the time. People say, I've already had COVID, I'm protected, and now the study says maybe even more protected than the vaccine alone. Should they also get the vaccine? How do you make the case to them?
You know, that's a really good point, Sanjay. I don't have a really firm answer for you on that.
He does, I don't know, but just go take this medical procedure, and I don't really have a good answer for you why you should do it. What? And why do I bring that up? Because this is in The Guardian from September 10th. It says, boys more at risk from Pfizer jab side effects than COVID, suggests a study. Healthy boys may be more likely to be admitted to hospital with the rare side effect of the Pfizer-BioNTech, the COVID vaccine that causes inflammation of the heart, than with COVID itself. Their analysis of medical data suggests that boys aged 12 to 15 with no underlying medical conditions are 4 to 6 times more likely to be diagnosed with vaccine-related myocarditis than ending up in a hospital with COVID over a 4-month period. Do you understand what they're saying? They're saying you are 12 to 15. If you're 12 to 15, you are 4 to 6 times more likely to get a heart inflammation from the jab than you are to have to go to the hospital if you get COVID. That's pretty clear which is more dangerous for a boy between 12 to 15 years old. Most children who experienced the rare side effect had symptoms within days of the second shot of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, and similar side effects seen with the Moderna jab. About 86% of the boys affected required some hospital care. 86% required hospital care. The UK's Joint Committee on Vaccine Immunization made the decision to not recommend vaccinating healthy 12 to 15-year-olds. So that's just one. That's just one study, one article, and that's just one country. That's happening in Canada, too. They've already said males under 24 years old should not take the Moderna vax. And here is Joe Rogan asking Dr. Sanjay Gupta about that. And watch how Sanjay Gupta tries every which way from Sunday to try to defend anti-science. His flex is to defend the vaccine no matter what. Watch this.
But I certainly wouldn't look at that and say this is a reason for children not to get vaccinated.
But if there is if there's a study that shows that young boys in particular are more likely to have an adverse reaction to the vaccine than they are to catching COVID, why would
Is there a study that shows that?
Yes, let's find it. Boys more at risk from...
Jesus Christ! Again, another comedian has to school the CNN doctor. Is there a study that says that? Yes. Watch, a fucking comedian. Watch this.
Pfizer jab side effect than COVID study suggested. U.S. researchers say teenagers more likely to get vaccine-related myocarditis than end up in the hospital with COVID.
I think, like if you were to ask the question, how likely you'd end up in the hospital after a vaccine versus how likely you end up in the hospital after COVID, that would be a fair comparison.
What do you think is wrong with this comparison that they're making? Let's put it up again so you can specifically read it and tell me what's wrong, because I feel like you're kind of cherry picking here.
No.
Because it says the data suggests that boys 12 to 15 with no underlying medical conditions are 4 to 6 times more likely to be diagnosed with vaccine-related myocarditis than ending up in the hospital with COVID.
Ending up in the hospital with COVID for anything, right? I mean, there are two different groups of patients here. One is specifically myocarditis.
Right, but ending up in the hospital with COVID over anything would give you more data.
Yeah.
It would give you more instances.
Right. So I mean,
that would make more people.
So Dr. Sanjay Gupta, Max, do you see this? Are you following this? Do you see that Dr. Sanjay Gupta is trying to misinterpret what this article is on purpose? He's trying to misinterpret what it's saying. And Joe Rogan has to explain a medical study to the CNN doctor. Let me play the rest of this clip. Hang on.
Hospitalized with COVID. Your example falls the wrong way.
So
right?
What I'm saying is that most of the people who got myocarditis did not need to go to the hospital.
86% of them did. He's wrong again. Why? Joseph points it out.
86% of the boys affected required some hospital care.
Yeah, I think so.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I don't know that they ended up needing to be hospitalized, though.
But it says it right there. 86% of the boys affected by vaccine-related myocarditis required some hospital care.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying, but when you look at the data
this
overall,
doesn't concern you? This doesn't make you pause?
It does concern me, totally. I think, but the question still is from a risk-reward proposition.
The risk-reward proposition there is very clear. You're ignoring the science that they're presenting. No, they're showing that you're more likely to get myocarditis at a large number, 4 to 6 times more likely.
They're not saying myocarditis. They're saying it's
then be hospitalized with COVID.
Hospitalized with COVID.
But you have an impulse to defend the vaccination in light of this data.
Yes, he has a flex. So let me bring in Max. Max, would you like to? By the way, for if you have a kid, COVID, children's extremely low risk, confirmed by study. The overall risk of children becoming severely ill or dying from COVID is extremely low, almost nil. A new analysis of COVID infection data confirmed. So let me bring in Max. So Max, go ahead. What would you like to say to that?
Well, so much of what we learned in like 5th grade science or junior high biology, it applies to the current COVID conversation, whether it's natural immunity. Of course, natural immunity is stronger than vaccination alone. I mean, you learn that as a young person when you get a fever or the flu, that you build up B memory cells and you'll be able to have a stronger immune system afterwards. I mean, this is just basic stuff. And you know that children have stronger immune systems than people over 70. And so it's obviously true that a child who is not vaccinated that gets COVID is in a much better position than a double jabbed person over 70 with no comorbidities. Really, the only children that have died of COVID-related conditions during this pandemic have been children with extreme comorbidities who are already dying of cancer, whose immune systems were shot to hell. Little kids have a greater chance of being killed by a goat than they do of dying of COVID.
Yeah.
And now we're learning that especially in pre-adolescent and adolescent boys, myocarditis is a real risk. And the LA School District is requiring everyone 12 and up to be vaccinated. I wonder if it's a coincidence that it is facing its second lowest enrollment, the LA School District, in years. 30,000 kids have not showed up. Gavin Newsom has a 12-year-old daughter, and she has yet to be vaccinated. That's the governor of California who is imposing these mandates. So why is Sanjay Gupta obsessed with this? It doesn't have to do with science. It has to do with his own image. He did some stunt where he tried to convince a 5-year-old to get vaccinated. It makes it look like he's saving children's lives out there. And the risk reward is not necessarily in favor of doing that, especially when you consider the efficacy of vaccines, that they wane after 4 or 5 months, which is why in Israel, those fully vaccinated over 6 months ago are no longer considered vaccinated and are not eligible for the Green Pass system and therefore isolated from society until they get a third vaccine. And Israel's coronavirus czar has rolled out plans for a fourth vaccine. I don't know, maybe by like 2050, they'll be on their 79th booster shot. I don't know what that's going to look like. But this isn't, from a perspective of a child who has a really strong immune system, it just makes basic sense. And you have the British panel of experts recommending that this not take place, and the British government, the political elected officials, going in the opposite direction, the Boris Johnson government. The same thing's happening in the U.S. The Biden administration wants the authorization for 5 and up, but the FDA hasn't ruled on it. And we already saw the FDA come out strongly in a landslide against boosters, against what the Biden administration, what Biden, the CDC, what Fauci wanted. And these are, agencies that are captured by big pharma. I mean, look, once they get past the kids and vaccinating them, they'll start vaccinating animals. Just they need something to do with all these vaccines to keep producing them. And in fact, at several zoos, there have been vaccination campaigns to protect the animals against COVID-19. This happened in Baltimore recently. So it's like, it's become kind of like almost like a religion.
I would say beyond a religion. When you see Dr. Sanjay Gupta talking to Joe Rogan, a comedian, and Joe Rogan having to talk Dr. Sanjay Gupta through a medical study, and Dr. Sanjay Gupta getting it wrong at every turn, and Joe having to correct him at every turn, that is amazing.
Well, it's like he's not even aware of the study.
Right.
It's like the first time he's heard of it, which just shows the kind of idiotic atmosphere he's in at CNN. He's just surrounded by these Men's Warehouse mannequins like Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon, who just read scripts all day. I mean, they might as well be AI-generated hosts. I don't know if AI can be that demagogic and hateful towards people that refuse to follow the official biomedical ideology. But beyond that, these characters have the charisma of drying paint and could be replaced by holograms. And that's the world Sanjay Gupta is in. No one challenges him at CNN. And so he went into the lion's den where he got asked basic questions that are based on basic scientific principles that we learn in 5th grade in school. And he seemed like a deer in the headlights.
Yeah. Yeah, he's
Sorry for the mixed metaphor.
He's like, what's this study? Is there a study about this, Joe? Joe, tell me about what's happening with COVID. I'm the doctor from CNN. Can you fill me in on the latest? He had to go to Spotify. He had to go to a comedian's podcast to get filled in about the risks of myocarditis to young people from the vax. He had to go to a comedian's podcast on Spotify to find this information out. And now do you understand why people come here for information and they don't trust anything they say at YouTube? I mean, anything they say at CNN? And here, let me just remind you, the people lying about this have been the people in the government. Dr. Fauci has lied about COVID-19 and vaccines and herd immunity at least 3 huge times. He lied about the funding of gain-of-function research. He lied about how many people would have to take a vaccine to reach herd immunity. And here he is lying about masks.
People should not be walking around with masks.
Let me just state for the record that masks are not theater.
Wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better. And
Masks are protective.
But it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is.
Mark, there has not been any indication that putting a mask on and wearing a mask for a considerable period of time has any deleterious effects.
There are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
And can you get some schmutz sort of staying inside there?
Of course.
You do not need to wear a mask indoors if, in fact, you've been vaccinated. But good that you're vaccinated, but in a situation where you have people indoors, particularly crowded, you should wear a mask.
So even if you are vaccinated, you should wear a mask. That if, in fact, you are vaccinated, fully vaccinated, you are protected, and you do not need to wear a mask outdoors or indoors. When the children go out into the community, You want them to continue to wear masks.
You know, if you look at children outside, particularly when they're with the family, walking down the street, playing a game or what have you, don't have to wear a mask.
The Academy of Pediatric actually makes that recommendation that children should be wearing masks from 2 years old onward.
And you're asking now, if your child is a member of your household, can you walk outdoors with your child without a mask? According to that chart, the answer is yes.
But the child can't, not to beat it to death.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Because now the CDC says, I mean, I think I've got this right. 1 mask is better than 0 masks. 2 masks is better than 1 mask. But you don't have to have double masks. Is that right? I mean,
it became clear that cloth coverings that you didn't have to buy in a store, that you could make yourself, were adequate. And then you want it to fit better. So one of the ways you could do it, if you would like to, is put a cloth mask over, which actually here and here and here, where you could get leakage in, is much better contained.
are you a double masker, Dr. Fauci? It looked like you are.
Well, there he is without his mask. Anyway, so that's just so you know, I don't know how anybody could trust Dr. Fauci or the government. The governor of New York last year, when he was getting an Emmy, said he didn't trust the FDA and he didn't trust the process. So all of a sudden, everybody's trusting everything everybody. So I don't trust anything the government says. But Max, anything you'd like to say to close out this segment? We're going to get to Aaron pretty soon.
Yeah, no, I just remember that in one of Fauci's emails to Sylvia Burwell, who I think was HHS director under Obama, a secretary, she asked, should I wear a mask while traveling? It was just someone asking him in private. And he said, no, there's no point, because masks are only for infected people to not spread to uninfected people. And they don't actually work. And I'll quote him: the typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out virus, which is small enough to pass through material. It might, however, provide some slight benefit in keeping out gross droplets if someone coughs or sneezes on you. And I mean, you look at the box of the masks and it says that. So, I mean, it's kind of common sense. And here you have someone saying something different in public that he's been saying in private. It's no wonder that the credibility of not just Fauci, but public health officials has been so exposed thanks to characters like him during the past 2 years.
Max Blumenthal, thank you so much for joining us in our roundup of the establishment media's lies about COVID, Joe Rogan and ivermectin. Thanks very much. Everybody check out
thanks a lot, Jimmy.
Everybody check out The Gray Zone, and thanks for coming on, pal.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. For doing stand-up comedy in Florida, in West Palm Beach and Dania, and then we're going to Buffalo, Baltimore, Tempe, and Portland. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all our tickets.